You don't realize how silent choking really is until it happens to you. No dramatic scream, no movie scene. Just a terrifying moment where your lungs stop obeying you and your brain starts burning through oxygen while you stand frozen in your own kitchen wondering if this is how it ends. And what most people do next makes the blockage worse. If you're serious about taking better care of your health, make sure you subscribe. I share simple, practical advice designed especially for seniors. And feel free to leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I appreciate every one of you. Let's get back to it. It starts on a night just like tonight. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. The television is running low in the background. The dinner dishes are already washed. You're standing in the kitchen under that quiet overhead light, reaching into the cabinet for something small. Crackers, maybe a handful of almonds, a leftover piece of bread from earlier, just a small bite before bed. You've done it 1,000 times. You chew, you swallow, and then something doesn't move the way it should. It's subtle at first, almost ignorable, a slight resistance somewhere between your throat and your chest. Not pain exactly, more like pressure, like a door that won't quite close all the way. You think, I swallowed too fast. You clear your throat, nothing. You try again, still nothing. So you reach for your glass of water because that's what you do. That's what everyone does. And you take a slow sip, expecting it to push things through the way it always has. But this time, the pressure gets worse. And now your body does something it has never done before in your kitchen on an ordinary night. It stops letting air through completely. Not all the way, not instantly, but the next breath. The one that should arrive automatically. The one your lungs have been taking for 60-some years without a single thought. That breath is smaller than it should be, and then smaller again. Your hands move to your throat without you deciding to move them. Your chest tightens. Your eyes go to the phone on the counter, and then to the front door, and then back to the phone. And you realize in one cold, terrible moment, there is no one else in this house. Here is what medical researchers have confirmed in studies on airway emergencies. The human brain, the moment it detects restricted airflow, floods the body with adrenaline. Within seconds, heart rate spikes, rational thinking narrows, coordination begins to deteriorate, and oxygen deprivation, even partial, can begin impairing judgment in as little as 60 to 90 seconds. 60 seconds, that's not very long. And here is the part that nobody tells you. The part that changes everything you think you know about this kind of emergency. The blockage is not the most dangerous thing happening in that moment. The most dangerous thing is what your mind does next, because the body gives warnings before panic fully arrives. Most people miss them. I'm Dr. James Cross. And what I'm about to share with you in this video has nothing to do with luck and everything to do with what happens inside the first 20 seconds of a choking emergency when you are completely alone. Those 20 seconds have a structure, and tonight, you're going to learn exactly what it looks like. Most people assume their body works the same way it always has. Same throat, same swallow, same automatic process that has never once required a second thought. But here is what the science actually says. After the age of 60, the muscles responsible for swallowing, a coordinated group of over 30 individual muscles working in precise sequence, begin to lose both strength and timing. This process is called presbysia, and most people have never heard of it because it happens so gradually that you never feel it happening. No warning, no announcement, just a slow, invisible change in one of the most critical functions your body performs dozens of times every single day. A landmark review published in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society found that swallowing dysfunction affects an estimated 15% of community-dwelling older adults, people living independently, eating normally, going about their lives with no idea their airway protection has quietly diminished. And it's not just the muscles. Saliva production decreases with age. Saliva is not just moisture. It is the lubricant that moves food safely down the esophagus. Less saliva means food travels slower, drier, and with far less margin for error. Nerve response slows down too. The split-second signal that tells your airway to close the moment food passes, the reflex that has protected you your entire life becomes less sharp, less automatic, less reliable. And then there are the medications, blood pressure medications, antihistamines, antidepressants, sleep aids. These are among the most commonly prescribed drugs for adults over 60, and many of them list dry mouth and reduced muscle coordination directly on their warning labels, which means millions of older adults are sitting down to eat every single day with a compromised swallowing mechanism they know absolutely nothing about. Now add one more layer: dentures. When teeth are replaced by dentures, the mouth loses a significant portion of its ability to break food down properly before swallowing. Larger, drier, less processed pieces of food enter the throat more frequently, and the throat is less equipped to handle them than it used to be. This is why the foods that never once bothered you, a thick piece of steak, a dry bread roll, a handful of nuts, white rice, a vitamin tablet, can become genuinely dangerous after a certain age. Not because the food changed, because you did. And the cruelest part of all this is the timing. Most older adults never discover any of this until an emergency is already in progress, until the pressure is already building, until the water trick has already failed and panic is already arriving. By then, the window is already narrowing. That's why understanding what happens in your body after 60 isn't optional. It is the difference between reacting in time and realizing too late that you needed this information years ago, so now you know what changed in your body. But knowing that your swallowing muscles have weakened, that your saliva production has dropped, that your nerve reflexes have slowed, none of that helps you in the moment when food is lodged in your airway and the clock has already started. What helps you in that moment is understanding the second emergency, because here is what nobody talks about. When your airway becomes blocked, two things go wrong simultaneously. The first is the obstruction itself. The second, and this is the one that kills people, is what your brain does in response to it. The moment your body detects restricted airflow, your sympathetic nervous system fires instantly. Adrenaline floods your bloodstream. Your heart rate surges. Your blood vessels tighten. Your pupils dilate. Every non-essential function in your body shuts down so that your muscles can prepare for one thing: fight or flight. Except there is nothing to fight and nowhere to run. The threat is inside your own throat. And so all of that adrenaline, all of that surging biological energy has nowhere useful to go. Instead, it creates what researchers describe as cognitive tunneling, a state where rational sequential thinking collapses and the brain begins firing in short fragmented bursts. You stop thinking in sentences. You start thinking in flashes: water, phone, door, throat. Can't breathe. Someone help. Why isn't this working? I can't. A study from the Journal of Emergency Medicine noted that individuals experiencing acute airway obstruction frequently engage in counterproductive physical responses: random movements, repeated ineffective coughing, attempts to speak, all of which consume the very oxygen, reserves they cannot afford to lose. And here is the part that should stop you completely. Oxygen deprivation does not wait politely. Within 60 to 90 seconds of significant airway restriction, cognitive function begins to decline. Within 2 to 3 minutes, muscle coordination deteriorates noticeably. The legs weaken. Vision begins to narrow at the edges. Simple decisions become genuinely difficult. You do not have the luxury of panic, but panic does not ask for your permission. So what do? You interrupt it. Before panic reaches full momentum, there is a narrow window just a few seconds wide where the rational mind can still override the body's fear response. Neuroscientists call this the cognitive override window and the most effective tool for activating. It is devastatingly simple. A single short phrase, not a long thought, not a plan, not a prayer, just a command. Air first, or stay moving, or simply act now. These phrases work because they do something specific inside a panicking brain. They give it a target. Research on stress inoculation training used by military and emergency responders worldwide consistently shows that short verbal commands can interrupt the freeze response and restore purposeful physical action under extreme duress. Your brain needs one instruction. Give it one. Picture this clearly. You are standing at the kitchen sink. Your hands are gripping the edge of the counter. The air is moving but barely. Your chest is tight. Your thoughts are starting to scatter. That is the moment, not after, not when it gets worse. That exact moment when fear is rising but has not yet taken over completely is when one quiet, deliberate command to yourself can shift everything. The people who survive choking emergencies alone are rarely the strongest people. They are the people who interrupted panic before panic interrupted them, and that interruption begins in your mind long before it becomes physical. Because the first move in this emergency isn't with your hands, it's with your voice. Even if that voice is only inside your head, you've interrupted the panic. Your mind has a target, your body has a command. And somewhere beneath all that fear and pressure and adrenaline, you notice something. You can still cough, it's weak. It's nothing like a normal cough. It sounds almost embarrassing. A small, strained, barely there push of air that feels like it's accomplishing nothing. But here is what that weak cough is actually telling you. Air is still moving. And that changes everything. In emergency airway medicine, the single most important distinction a physician makes is this partial obstruction or complete obstruction. Because a partial obstruction, where even the smallest amount of air is still passing through, is a situation you can work with. It means the blockage has not sealed the airway entirely. It means you still have a tool. That weak cough is your tool. But most people use it wrong. The instinct is to cough repeatedly. Short, rapid machine gun bursts that feel urgent and aggressive, but generate almost no actual airway pressure. Each tiny cough burns oxygen. Each failed attempt feeds the panic, and the obstruction doesn't move. Here's what the physiology actually requires. The human cough reflex, when functioning at full capacity, can generate expiratory airflow velocities of up to 500 mph. That is the force your airway was designed to produce. But that force requires compression, a deep buildup of pressure before release. Rapid, shallow coughing produces almost none of it. What you need instead is one deliberate, explosive cough. 1. Here is exactly how it works. First, lean forward, not backward, forward. This is critical and almost universally ignored in the panic of the moment. Leaning forward uses gravity to prevent the obstruction from sliding deeper into the airway and positions your diaphragm for maximum upward force. Second, close your mouth. Breathe in slowly through your nose. Even the smallest amount of air entering the lungs creates the compression you need. Don't rush this one controlled inhale. Third, engage your abdomen, not your throat, not your chest. Your stomach muscles pulled inward and upward like you're bracing for a punch. Those muscles are the engine behind a true cough. Now, release everything at once. One hard, deliberate, focused burst of air directed upward through the airway, not 10 soft pushes. One research on airway clearance techniques consistently shows that a single high-pressure cough generates dramatically more expulsive force than multiple low-pressure attempts. The body is not trying to nudge the obstruction loose. It is trying to create a controlled air explosion powerful enough to launch it free. That is what you are recreating. And in many cases, more cases than you would expect, this is the moment the blockage clears. But if it doesn't, the next step requires something more. Something physical, something deliberate, and something that most people instinctively avoid, even when their life depends on it. The cough didn't work. You tried, you leaned forward, you engaged your abdomen the way I described. You gave it everything you had, but the blockage is still there. And now your mind is doing something predictable, something completely human, something that feels logical in the moment, but is quietly, dangerously wrong. It is looking for the easy solution, the one that doesn't hurt, the one that doesn't require force, the one that feels gentle enough to be safe. And almost every older adult in this situation reaches for the same thing. The glass of water. It makes sense, doesn't it? The food is stuck. Water moves things. Water has solved minor swallowing discomfort 1,000 times before. So, the instinct is overwhelming. Drink something, wash it down, let the liquid do what the cough couldn't. But here is what actually happens. When the airway is even, partially obstructed, liquid does not flow around the blockage the way you imagine it will. Instead, it pools. It accumulates above the obstruction. And now you have introduced fluid into an already compromised airway, creating a secondary aspiration risk that can trigger choking on the water itself. What began as a food obstruction can now become a fluid obstruction. You have made the emergency worse while believing you were solving it. And water is not the only mistake people make. Some people try to swallow harder. They believe that if they force the muscles to contract with more intensity, the food will push through. But with a true airway obstruction, forceful swallowing attempts can actually compress the blockage tighter against the airway walls, reducing the already narrow passage even further. Some people lie down. This is perhaps the most dangerous instinct of all. When dizziness and weakness arrive, and they will arrive because oxygen is already declining, the body craves the floor. It craves horizontal. It feels safer somehow. But lying down removes the gravitational advantage that was helping keep the obstruction from descending deeper. It collapses the diaphragm's range of motion. It makes every subsequent rescue technique dramatically less effective. And then there is the most quietly devastating mistake of all: waiting. Telling yourself it will pass. Telling yourself to stay calm and give it another minute. Convincing yourself that the body will sort itself out if you just don't panic and give it a moment to reset. Research on hypoxia, oxygen deprivation, is unambiguous on this point. Blood oxygen saturation can begin dropping measurably within 60 seconds of significant airway restriction. At around 85% saturation, confusion sets in. At 80%, coordination begins failing. Below 70%, loss of consciousness becomes a real and rapidly approaching possibility. A minute of waiting is not harmless. A minute of waiting is a minute of oxygen you cannot get back. Here is what the body is doing while you wait. Your legs are getting heavier. Your thoughts are getting slower. Your grip strength, the same grip strength you will desperately need in the next 60 seconds, is quietly leaving you. And strength once lost to oxygen deprivation does not come back quickly. This is why the transition from coughing to physical intervention must happen fast. Not after the water fails. Not after lying down makes things worse. Not after another 30 seconds of hoping. Now. The moment the cough does not clear the airway in 2 or 3 attempts, you escalate. Because hesitation at this stage is not caution. It is the mistake that costs everything. You are not waiting anymore. The water is back on the counter. You are not lying down. You are not giving it another minute. You heard what I just told you about oxygen and time and what hesitation actually costs. And you are moving. Good. Because right now in this kitchen, in this house where nobody else is home, everything you need to survive is already within reach. You just have to know where to look. Scan the room. Not frantically, not with panic-scattered eyes. One deliberate scan there. The kitchen counter, solid, fixed, unmovable, or the back of a heavy dining chair. The arm of a thick wooden sofa. The edge of a sturdy table that has sat in the same spot for 20 years. Any firm, stable surface that will not shift when you press your full body weight against it. That surface is your rescue device. Here is exactly what you're going to do with it. Position the upper part of your abdomen against the edge. Specifically, the area just above your belly button and just below where your rib cage meets in the center. This is the precise anatomical location that produces maximum upward pressure toward the diaphragm when compressed. This is not accidental. This is not improvised. This is the same principle used in the Heimlich maneuver. The same upward, abdominal compression that trained rescuers apply with their fists. Except you are using the edge of the counter to generate that force yourself. Now thrust. Lean your full body weight inward and upward against that edge. Not gently, not tentatively, with everything you have left. Because this is the moment that requires you to make a decision most people find extraordinarily difficult in the middle of an emergency. You have to choose discomfort. The edge will hurt. Your abdomen will protest. There may be bruising tomorrow. Every instinct in your body will tell you to ease off, to apply a little less pressure, to try it softer first, to protect yourself from the pain. Ignore it. A study examining self-administered abdominal thrust techniques confirmed that sufficient inward and upward force, not gentle pressure, but true compression, can generate enough rapid diaphragmatic movement to expel a foreign body from the upper airway in a single attempt. The force is the point. Pain is not failure. Pain is proof that something is actually happening. One man in his early 70s survived a complete steak obstruction alone in his kitchen using nothing but the corner edge of his counter. He later said the thing that surprised him most was not the technique itself. It was how fast his body weakened, how quickly the strength left his legs, how narrow his vision had already become by the time he made it to that counter. Which means the window for this technique, the window where you still have enough strength and enough consciousness to execute it properly, is not long. You act now, not in 30 seconds. Now the counter didn't work. You hit it once, you hit it twice. You gave it everything your body had left, and the blockage is still there. And now something new is happening. Your legs are shaking, not trembling the way they do after a long walk or a difficult climb. This is different. This is the specific, unmistakable weakness that comes when the brain begins rationing what little oxygen remains in the bloodstream, pulling resources away from the extremities and redirecting them toward the organs that matter most. Your vision is narrowing at the edges. Your thoughts are arriving slower than they should. And the floor, the cold, hard, unforgiving floor, is starting to feel less like a threat and more like the only place your body wants to be. Do not fight that. Use it. Because this final technique, the one that exists for exactly this moment when strength is leaving and time is almost gone, requires the floor. Lower yourself carefully. Use the counter edge, the chair, the wall, whatever is beside you to guide yourself down rather than collapse. Controlled descent. Every second of consciousness is still a second you can use. Once you are on the floor, position yourself on your knees if possible, or seated with your back against something solid. Now make a fist with one hand. Place it against your abdomen at the same position as before. Above the navel, below the rib cage. Cover that fist with your other hand. And now do something that feels counterintuitive in every possible way. Fall forward into it. Use your own body weight, gravity, momentum, and compression, working simultaneously, to drive your fists inward and sharply upward against your diaphragm. This is not a gentle maneuver. This was never meant to be. What you are doing is using the one resource that oxygen deprivation cannot immediately take from you: your mass, your weight, the simple, irrefutable physics of a body in motion pressing against a fixed point. The objective is singular. Generate enough rapid internal pressure to force a violent column of air upward through the airway. One last explosive attempt to dislodge the obstruction before consciousness begins to fade. Research on positional airway clearance confirms that combining gravitational force with manual abdominal compression produces significantly greater diaphragmatic pressure than standing techniques alone, particularly as muscular strength declines, which means the floor is not defeat. The floor is your last weapon. Use it like one. And through all of this, the shaking legs, the narrowing vision, the exhaustion pressing down on every part of you, one thing must remain: movement. Not perfect movement, not textbook movement, any movement. Because the body can endure extraordinary things when action continues. When the hands keep working, when the mind refuses to accept stillness as the answer. Emergencies are not survived by the perfect. They are survived by the relentless. You made it. Maybe the counter worked. Maybe the floor technique cleared it. Maybe that one deliberate explosive cough we talked about was all it ever needed. However it happened, the air came back. And with it, something else arrives. Something quieter than panic and far more lasting than fear. The realization that it was real, that it happened, that the ordinary kitchen, the ordinary night, the ordinary handful of something small before bed, nearly became the last moment of an ordinary life. Nobody thinks about choking prevention the way they think about heart disease or cancer or stroke. There are no awareness months, no television campaigns, no annual screenings. But according to the National Safety Council, choking is among the leading causes of accidental death in adults over 65 in the United States. And the overwhelming majority of those incidents happen at home, alone, during a routine meal, not during something dramatic, during something ordinary, which means prevention does not require a medical degree or an expensive intervention. It requires a decision made before the meal begins. Starting tonight, before you sit down to eat alone, Take 30 seconds to do one thing. Look around the room. Locate the nearest solid counter edge. Identify the heaviest, most stable chair within reach. Note where your phone is, not across the house, not in the bedroom, but within arm's reach of where you are eating. 30 seconds. That mental rehearsal, that quiet, deliberate scan is not paranoia. Research on emergency preparedness consistently demonstrates that people who have mentally pre-rehearsed a crisis response react faster, make fewer errors, and maintain cognitive function longer under stress than those encountering the situation cold. Your brain cannot improvise well without oxygen, but it can execute something it has already practiced. There are other changes worth making too. Eat slower. This is not about manners. It is about giving your swallowing muscles the time they need to coordinate properly. Cut food into smaller pieces than feels necessary. Stay hydrated throughout meals, not just before or after. Be particularly careful with the high-risk foods: dry bread, thick meat, white rice, large vitamin tablets, raw vegetables, especially if you are on medications that reduce saliva or slow muscle response. And have the conversation with your children, your neighbors, the friend who lives alone 2 streets away. Share this video. Describe what you learned, because the cruelest truth about choking emergencies is that the people most at risk are often the least likely to seek out this information themselves. You watched this today. Not everyone did. And somewhere right now, someone who loves you is sitting down to eat alone without knowing a single technique in this video, without a counter edge identified, without a plan. That is the only thing left to fix. In emergencies, survival usually belongs to the person who acts before fear fully takes over. Thanks for watching all the way through. Staying informed is key to living a healthier, longer life. If you want more simple, practical health advice, make sure you subscribe and tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a comment and rate this from 1 to 10. Your feedback helps me create better guidance for